Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today's our Pali Canon and English study group, where we'll be studying the words of the Buddha through the Pali Canon, or the Pali text. This is the original source of Gotama Buddha's teachings, and it has been translated into English so that we're able to then study the words of the Buddha and understand those, reflect on his teachings, and then practice them in order to improve the condition of our mind through developing our life practice. In this class, we're finishing up this book, The Realms of Existence. We've been studying the various chapters week by week by week, and now this is a time for the students to come and ask any questions. This week, we're studying chapters 120 through 150. And if you don't have a version of this book, you can download it from the website buddhadailywisdom.com, and then just go to the upper right corner and click on free books. From there, you'll get a whole library of books that you can download for free, and you can order printed copies as well. And from there, you'll be able to join this program, because next week we move into the book titled Lowly Arts. This is a lot of teachings related to kind of the dark arts, or things that the Buddha taught the ordained practitioners not to do. Most of this book is really geared towards ordained practitioners, but as household practitioners, there's a lot that we can actually glean from these teachings, because even though it's the guidance and training guidelines for the ordained practitioners, there's things that we can extrapolate out of there, apply them to our household life, and realize some benefits from those teachings, because the ordained practitioners are practicing a more rigid, more strict, more disciplined approach to attaining enlightenment through entering into homelessness and giving up a lot of things in their life. Well, there's certain lessons that the Buddha taught that we can really bring into our life as household practitioners, just maybe adjusting them slightly and being able to gain insight into how he was guiding his closest, most dedicated students. So we're going to be moving into that next week, and we'll talk about the chapters that we're going to actually be studying next week. If I remember correctly, it's like chapters 1 through 39 or 1 through 49, something like that. But we'll talk about that towards the end of the class. Today is all about the realms of existence and finishing this up. And this last part of the book, the Buddha's teachings that have been selected to put into this book are all about the attainment of enlightenment and progressing towards enlightenment. So you may have questions on those as we go. If you haven't read this book or you don't have a copy of it, it's okay, because the way that we start our class is we start with meditation to help prepare the mind to learn, kind of clear out anything that's in the mind and help the mind to retain the teachings a bit better. And then once we start learning from the chapters, the students will ask questions, but I will display the chapters on the screen. So if you don't have a version of this book right now, you'll still be able to participate in our class and learn from what we're actually sharing. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're in Zoom or YouTube or Facebook or wherever you might be hearing this across the internet. And at this point, I would just like to invite you to do some meditation, pull up a meditation cushion, or sit in a chair to be able to start training the mind and prepare it for studying today. So make your lower body comfortable. Your upper body should be nice and erect. This keeps the upper body engaged so that the mind can be attentive and alert during meditation, because meditation should be active. There should be a real active role where you're actively training the mind. So here in breathing mindfulness meditation, we're training the mind to focus on the breath, eliminating craving, desire, attachment, the cause of discontentedness, and cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind. And this becomes very crucial and very beneficial in your daily practice. Without this meditation, I would say that you wouldn't be able to attain enlightenment. So it's really important to develop this as part of your practice. Your hands and arms can go comfortably in your lap, and you can just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Just focus on developing a nice, natural breath. You should be experiencing the full inhale, breathing in, nice and gradual, a full inhale. Notice the transition where there's kind of a gap between the inhale and the exhale, and then a nice, gradual, full exhale. And then notice that gap as you transition into the inhale. No need to rush that or hurry that, but just slow the breath down. By slowing the breath down and fixating the mind on the breath, you'll end up slowing the mind down, bringing it into the present moment. So your breath doesn't need to sync up to the guidance that I'm giving. Just focus on breathing in, noticing the gap, observing that. Exhale. Noticing the gap. And start your inhale. Fixate the mind on the breath. The breath is the present moment. You should be fixated on the sound of the breath or the sensation of air moving into the nose. I'm going to do some chanting just to ease us into meditation, and you're more than welcome to join along if you know these chants. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Otang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhuto Bhagavati. Okay, you should be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Just going to give you a little bit of light guidance, just for anyone that hasn't been meditating with us. Then I'm going to be quiet and let you do the work. Breathe in gradually through the nose. Observe the gap. And then exhale through the nose. Observing the gap and back to the inhale. As you're breathing, focus the mind on the breath. Wherever you notice that the mind is off the breath, cut that off, let it go. Bring the mind back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now. Just let you do the work to train the mind to be aware, have mindfulness whenever it's not on the breath. And when you notice that, cut it off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอะภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมพุทโธสัคขะโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ All right. So for this class, I basically just turn it over to you guys. As you know, we study chapters 120 through 150 this week in the book The Realms of Existence, volume 11 from the Words of the Buddha book series. And you can ask any questions that you like on this by putting in your comment into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Our moderator Basam will see that and make sure that your question gets asked during the class. So I'll just turn things over to you guys for whatever questions that you might have.
Hello, teacher. A question from chapter 123.
Okay.
If you would be kind to share your screen.
Oh, yes.
Well, so Amin asks about, at the end, there is this quote, scatter feeling, scatter perception, scatter volitional formations, and the same for consciousness. Demolish it, shatter it, put it out of play. I think it's, the last paragraph. Yes, teacher, it starts with so too, Radha. How can someone scatter their perceptions?
Yeah, so the way that you do this is what a perception is a perception is your belief or opinion of how something seems to be. And oftentimes we form our perceptions in the unenlightened state without having full understanding or being able to see true reality. Because our belief or our opinion about a certain situation or something that's happening in our life or something that's transpired, we're looking through the pollution of our own craving, anger, and ignorance. So whenever we see something, or whenever we hear something, whenever we smell something, whenever we taste something, whenever we feel some bodily contact, or whatever is in the mind, whatever is being experienced through these 6 sense bases, it may or may not be formed through true reality. We may not be seeing true reality. And if we have a perceptual distortion, if we're having a misperception, then we're going to be making decisions based on that misperception. So what we need to do in terms of scattering our perceptions is we need to not hold on to them. We need to not cling to them. Instead, what we need to do is we need to be able to gain information through asking questions, through seeing the truth for ourselves, and then making wise decisions. One of the examples that I can give you on this, Amina, because I know you have a young daughter just like I do, that when young children are involved in something and they go off and they do something and they come back, when whatever we get in terms of information from them or their friends or their teacher or people in the neighborhood, it may conflict with what our child is telling us. And we have to be very wise to be able to ask questions of the people involved and not allow our perceptions to distort reality of what is true reality. And we need to be able to objectively see true reality and then make decisions. If we think our child is lying to us, but we don't really know for sure, and we accuse them of lying, this is going to degrade our relationship. And conversely, if we just think that our child is always telling the truth and we're not really looking at true reality, then our child gets used to getting away with lies, and they think that they can just do whatever they would want to do because they can always get away with their lies. So what we need to do, not just with our children, but our work environment, our life partners, our friends, our family, any situation that we're experiencing, if we haven't seen it with our own eyes, we can safely consider that we don't know true reality on the situation. We don't have full information of what's transpired. So we need to be able to ask questions. We need to be able to look at the evidence and be able to come to an understanding of what is true reality, and then make a wise decision based on what we know to be true. Not just our belief, not just our opinion, not just the way things seem to be, but based on true reality. So by scattering your perceptions, you're essentially letting them go. Because in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha describes that first noble truth, he describes it as clinging to the 5 aggregates. And that's kind of discontentedness, is by holding on to feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, consciousness. The mind is essentially causing its own discontentedness. So what we need to do is train the mind to let go of these things and no longer work through this distorted perceptions or this misperception, this unknowing of true reality, and no longer functioning through this craving or this longing that I just want to believe my child, or I just want to support my partner, or I just want to be liked in the community. No longer holding on to the feelings, no longer holding on to volitional formations or our decisions, realizing that all these things are impermanent, including the consciousness, and by holding on to them, it's going to cause discontentedness.
The next question is from chapter 133.
Okay.
Okay, I think here the Buddha is trying to say that there is no self. He is emphasizing the non-self teaching. So is what he is trying to say here, is it just there is some experiences? So one is just experiencing what is coming from the 6 senses?
Let's read through it and then we can review it together. It's fairly short. So the title of this chapter is There Is No You There. So yes, you're 100% correct that this is about non-self. I can't pronounce the name, but I'll try. Then Baya. When for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the recognized in reference to the recognized. Then Baya, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor beyond, nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress. So here, it does appear that he's referencing potentially the six sense bases, because he's talking about the seen, the heard, the sensed, and the recognized, but there's only four there. So it's probably not a direct reference to the six sense bases. What I think he's definitely referring to non-self, and he's essentially saying that none of these things that we see, none of these things that we hear, none of the things that we sense, none of the things that we recognize, none of these things are you. That's what he's essentially getting to, is anything that we're experiencing through these senses are not us. It's not who we are. There is no you there. And when there is no you in connection with that, then there is no you there. So basically training the mind to understand that you aren't any of these experiences that are happening through these senses. Then once you train the mind to understand that and you deeply practice it, then there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor beyond nor in between. So there is no you. And then he's saying this is the end of stress, because once you realize non-self and you eliminate all the other 10 fetters, then you won't experience any discontentedness or stress. So this is pointing to the teaching of non-self, the universal truth of non-self, and deeply understanding that, eradicating the personal existence view, which is the first fetter.
So do you agree that the delusion of self or ego, which is made by the mind, is a kind of craving to exist?
When I think of the ego, I think of personal existence view, which is made up of self-identity and self-image. And I think of conceit or arrogance, pride, measuring and comparing, judging others. This is what we call as the ego. And ask your question there again, Bassam.
Do you agree that the delusion, which is the self, which is made by the mind, is a kind of craving to exist?
Okay, the ego in craving existence, is if there's a, what we're calling the ego is part of that personal existence view. So there's part of the mind that wants to exist and wants to see this body and this mind as being the permanent self, but in reality it's not. When we think about the craving to exist, this is, yes, part of the personal existence view, but also that 6th and 7th fetter, where it's desire for form, desire for formless. Those are where the mind is really holding on to wanting to exist. But there's definitely some of that in the first fetter as well.
Okay, thanks. A question from Amina on chapter 131.
And by the way, Bassam, all of that I just described is part of the delusion and is part of the ignorance. And ignorance is its own fetter. It's the 10th fetter. So all of that is wrapped into those.
Okay, so from chapter 131.
31, okay.
Yeah, Amin asks, can we discuss this section, the burden carrier, is the person taking up this burden is discontentedness in the world. Lying the burden down is peaceful. She asks, what is the difference here between the individual burden and that of the world? How are they related?
Repeat that last part.
The question, she asks, saying, what is the difference between, what is the difference here between the individual burden and that of the world? And how are they related?
I'm not understanding that one sentence that you're sharing there.
Okay, she's asking about, I think, the second paragraph, teacher.
Yeah, I see the paragraph here, but I'm not hearing the wording that you're using there.
What is the difference here between the individual burden and that of the world?
Oh, that of what?
The world. The world.
The worded. I'm not understanding. Oh, the world.
World, yeah.
The world.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's go through this whole thing, and then if I don't answer the question, be sure that you ask a follow-up to make sure that we get to Amina's question, because I think this is a good one to go through the entire one. So this is called elimination of craving, called the laying down of the burden. In what, monks, is the laying down of the burden? It is the remainderless fading away in elimination of that same craving, the giving up and letting go of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. This is called the laying down of the burden. This is what the perfectly enlightened one said. Having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this: the five aggregates are truly burdens. The burden carrier is the person. Taking up the burden is discontentedness in the world. Laying the burden down is peaceful. Having laid the heavy burden down without taking up another burden, having drawn out craving with its root, one is free from hunger, fully extinguished. Okay, so let's go through this piece by piece. So here, the Buddha commonly will start off by asking a question, or someone else has asked him a question, and he's just going to repeat it. So in what, monks, is laying down the burden? So there's this burden that's being carried in the human mind. What is that burden? It is the remainderless fading away and elimination of that same craving. If you understand craving, it's that mental longing with a strong eagerness. The mind chasing after the objects of its affection, seeking pleasant feelings. This is a real burden to carry around, because the mind is just going and going and going and going and going and going, longing and longing and yearning and wanting and expecting, and it's just a huge burden to carry around. So the Buddha is saying the laying down of the burden is when this craving is fading away, when craving in the mind is fading away and it is eliminated. That's the laying down of the burden. The giving up and letting go of it, letting it go from the mind, no longer chasing those pleasant feelings, no longer chasing the objects of your affection. Freedom from it, because this is why the mind is bound in the cycle of rebirth, because it's got these fetters that are binding it into the cycle of rebirth, where it just keeps constantly chasing the objects of its desire. That's why the mind is not liberated. It's not free. But once you lay down the burden, the mind has freedom from the craving, from craving of the mind. The mind is now free of that by laying down the craving. Non-reliance on it. So don't rely on this craving for pleasant feelings in the mind. If we rely on this craving, then we're just going to keep chasing it over and over and over again. But by laying this craving down, we're laying down the burden of having to chase that. This is called the laying down of the burden. Okay? So elimination of craving, desire, attachment. This is what the perfectly enlightened one said. Having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this. So here's what he added more. Because remember, these are people who are kind of remembering his teachings, and now they're writing them down after the Buddha's death. So they're kind of annotating what actually happened. They're saying, okay, he said this, and now he said this. The 5 aggregates are truly burdens. Okay, whenever you're hearing about the 5 aggregates, this is essentially talking about the human being, the physical form, the feelings in the mind, the perceptions that we have, and we just talked about those perceptions and how they can be misleading oftentimes, volitional formations, the choices and decisions, and the consciousness or the mind. This is what makes a human being a human being. So what the Buddha is saying here is essentially carrying around these 5 aggregates, carrying around this physical form, carrying around these feelings, carrying around these perceptions, these choices and decisions or volitional formations, carrying around this mind is truly a burden. It's a lot of work. If you think about all the time that you spend brushing your teeth, washing your hair, cleaning your body, urinating, defecating, eating, shopping in order to eat, shopping in order to clothe the body, going to the doctors to take care of this body, resting because the body's tired. There's a huge, enormous part of our day that is just taking care of this physical body. It's truly a burden to carry around these 5 aggregates. That's what he's saying there. The burden carrier is the person. So the person, oftentimes we're talking about this, I think, just in a recent class, where there's like this physical body, there's this mind, but there is no self, but there's something there that's kind of controlling all of this and kind of observing all this. Some people call it the observer. The Buddha here is saying the burden carrier is the person, right? So this is kind of that third entity, so to speak. Taking up the burden is discontentedness in the world. So essentially, rebirth, coming into existence, is taking up the burden. It's discontentedness in the world. Because once there's existence, that means we're now taking up these 5 aggregates. And now we've essentially taken up this burden, and we're now going to experience discontentedness in the world because of our existence. If somebody's existing, they're going to experience discontentedness. The only reason why we exist is because we had craving in our previous existences. We didn't extinguish it, and because there was craving at our last death, that led to this new existence. And because of that craving, desire, attachment, there's going to be discontentedness. But now in this human form, we can gain the wisdom to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, these 10 fetters, and essentially get to this next part where he says, laying down the burden is peaceful. So once we lay down these 5 aggregates, we're no longer clinging or holding on to these 5 aggregates. That's where the mind becomes peaceful. Having laid the heavy burden down, so once the mind has been trained to let go of craving, desire, attachment, because when he's talking about burden here, he's talking about craving, desire, attachment. So having laid down the heavy burden, having laid down the enormous amount of craving, desire, attachment that's in the mind, having laid that down without taking up another one, because if we've eliminated the burden, we've laid it down, and the mind is now peaceful, that means we're out of the cycle of rebirth. We've attained enlightenment. So now we're not going to take up another burden. We're not going to experience another existence in the cycle of rebirth. So having laid down craving, desire, attachment, we're no longer going to take up a new existence or another burden, right? Having drawn out craving from its root, essentially eliminated craving, desire, attachment from the mind. That's the root. The root of craving, desire, attachment is in the mind. By penetrating the mind with wisdom of the Buddhist teachings, and then training with breathing mindfulness meditation, with generosity, and all the other teachings that I share in the group learning program, you're addressing the craving at the root, which is in the mind. So you're drawing that craving out. You're eliminating the craving out of the mind, right? You're like wringing out the rag, right? One is free from hunger, right? So you're no longer yearning. You no longer have this unquenchable thirst. You're no longer chasing after the objects of your affection. You're free from that hunger of chasing after these pleasant feelings. So one is free from the hunger of chasing these pleasant feelings. Fully extinguished. Craving is fully extinguished. And your life from this existence, having attained enlightenment and laid down the burden, eliminated this craving, desire, attachment, all your existence has been fully extinguished. There's no longer going to be any rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. So that's what this one's referring to. Did we get the answer to the question there, Bassam?
Yeah, I think yes, teacher, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Amina is saying yes, all clear.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, the next question is from Peplov and Amina. It's on chapter 135. The quote here is, no arising is seen, no vanishing is seen, and no alteration while it persists is seen. The question is, so what is seen?
Okay. So to explain that, let's first talk about this chapter prior to that so that you understand the conditioned, and then we'll talk about the unconditioned, okay? So the Buddha here is talking about what conditioned feelings are and what unconditioned feelings are. What a conditioned feeling is, in the Buddha's words, is there's an arising of the feeling and there's a vanishing of the feeling. And while the feeling exists, there's going to be a change or an alteration, okay? I describe this as an arising, a change, and then a fading, because that's kind of like the whole cycle, right? The Buddha sometimes orders things in maybe a different way than we would order them. And it might be the way that the language was structured, because certain languages are structured differently. But there's this arising of sadness. The sadness starts to change. It either gets more intense or more diminished, and then eventually it fades over time. It may be many hours, many days, many weeks, many months, but eventually it changes. That's because the feeling in the mind is based on some impermanent condition. In this impermanent condition, the mind is latching onto it and it's creating sadness. Somebody dies in your life. Well, there's this sadness that comes in because the mind was holding on to this impermanent condition of mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever died. The mind was holding on to this person, craving permanence, but that's an impermanent condition. It was experiencing pleasant feelings as long as mom, dad, grandma, grandpa are alive. But then once the mind experienced that impermanence of them dying, now there's this arising of sadness, there's this change or alteration, and then there's this fading away or this vanishing of the sadness. And it's not just sadness, it's all conditioned feelings. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. So happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, euphoria, exhilaration, all those pleasant feelings go through this same experience of arising, changing, and then ceasing to exist or fading out, because pleasant feelings are based on some impermanent condition. Painful feelings do the same thing. Sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, they're based on some impermanent condition. Feelings arise, they change, and then they cease to exist or they fade out, they vanish. That's what you're seeing in the mind. That's what you're observing in the mind with mindfulness. Anytime there's an arising of a feeling, a change, and a fading away, this is a conditioned feeling. And you're also going to experience this with neither painful nor pleasant. And I usually put in there boredom, loneliness, shyness, things like this, uncomfortableness, unsatisfactory. But people might say boredom and loneliness is very painful for them, and that's okay. But essentially there's these other type of feelings that arise, like shyness will arise, it will change, and then it will cease to exist because it's based on some impermanent condition. You go to a certain event, you need to do public speaking, the mind is really shy, is apprehensive, it starts arising this shyness, then as you get into it, maybe it kind of fades or maybe it increases a bit, and then it kind of fades away, and then you're off to the next thing because it's based on this impermanent condition of needing to do public speaking, for example. So unconditioned feelings, which the question was about, is just the opposite. This is what an enlightened mind is going to experience. The conditioned feelings is what an unenlightened mind is going to experience, because an unenlightened mind is basing its inner feelings on these impermanent conditions. It's a conditioned mind. The mind hasn't been deeply trained, so therefore it's basing its inner feelings on impermanent conditions. The enlightened mind has been trained so deeply that it has the wisdom and the mental discipline to no longer do that. It doesn't base its inner feelings on these impermanent conditions. So it experiences unconditioned feelings. That's what a enlightened mind experiences. And I describe this as peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, that the mind experiences these unconditioned feelings. The unconditioned experience, these unconditioned feelings, they're not based on any impermanent condition. The mind is just residing in the middle, permanently peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So that peacefulness that an enlightened mind experiences, that's fully enlightened, that is, not just feeling peacefulness for a week and then you get discontentedness. You've been experiencing peacefulness for a year, 2 or 3, persistently. What's going to happen is there's no arising of the peacefulness. There's no change or alteration of that peacefulness, and there's no fading away or vanishing of that peacefulness. It's just always there. The same thing with calmness, that there's no arising of the calmness, there's no change of the calmness, there's no decline or fading away or vanishing of it. The mind is just always calm, perfectly in the middle. And same thing with the serenity, same thing with the contentedness, same thing with the joy. There's just no arising of it, there's no change of it, and there's no fading of it. It's just always present because the mind is now unconditioned. It's been trained to no longer base its inner feelings on these impermanent conditions. It recognizes that, okay, I got a promotion at work. Okay, great. I've been working towards that. Let me continue to do good things at work. It doesn't get excited and happy and elated just because of this promotion, because it knows that that promotion is impermanent. And if the enlightened mind allows itself to get excited and elated about this promotion, then when that promotion no longer exists, maybe the company lays you off, maybe you get injured and you can no longer work at that company, then the mind's going to experience painful feelings. If it bases its pleasant feelings on this impermanent condition, then at some point it's going to experience painful feelings. So an enlightened mind will pursue goals, pursue objectives, but it won't base its inner feelings on these impermanent conditions. It will just pursue goals and objectives in life in order to progress in their life. There won't be an arising of any feelings seen, there won't be this change, and there won't be this fading away. Just permanent, peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy.
Well, chapters 137 and 138 actually were difficult for me to understand. So if you would be kind to explain them.
Okay, 37 and 38. Okay. So let's go through this one. In this fathom-long body. Fathom is a unit of measurement. It's about 6 feet. So whenever you see the word fathom, this is the way they refer to a measurement, a certain measurement. People knew what that was. I say, friend, that by traveling one cannot know, see, or reach that end of the world where one is not born, does not grow old and die, does not pass away and get reborn. Yet I say that without having reached the end of the world, there is no making an end of discontentedness. It is in this fathom-long body, endowed with perception and mind, that I proclaim the world, the origin of the world, the elimination of the world, and the way to the elimination of the world. Okay, so let's talk about this. So the first part, the Buddha does this frequently, is he'll say one thing, and then he'll say just the opposite in contrast of what he's teaching. And he also kind of interchanges words a little bit in order to kind of further help you understand what he's talking about. So this first sentence where he says, I say, friend, that by traveling one cannot know. So just by traveling around the world, just by traveling, going to Italy, going to the UK, the US, Thailand, Sri Lanka, all these different places in the world, one cannot know, see, or reach the end of the world, right? Where one is not born, does not grow old and die, and does not pass away and get reborn. So just by traveling around, you cannot gain the wisdom to know and see and understand the end of all of this cycle of rebirth. You're not going to be able to just travel around the world and discover on your own what it's going to take to get out of this whole cycle of rebirth, right? So just traveling around on your own, you're not going to be able to observe that. Yet I say that without having reached the end of the world, there is no making an end of discontentedness. So without having learned these teachings, without having gained the wisdom to understand this world, then there is no making an end to discontentedness. Okay? It is in this fathom-long body endowed with perception and mind that I proclaim the world. So now he's going to essentially talk about the Four Noble Truths, but he's going to talk about it in a different way. Instead of using the word discontentedness or the cause of discontentedness, the elimination of discontentedness, the way leading to the elimination of discontent, he's going to talk about it this way in talking about the world. Because the first part, he's saying, okay, you need the wisdom of the world. You need the wisdom of the universal truths. You need the wisdom of these natural laws of existence in order to make an end to this discontentedness. Well, what is that wisdom that you're talking about that I need? Well, you need to understand the Four Noble Truths. And that's what he's saying here when he says, I proclaim the world, the origin of the world, the elimination of the world, the way leading to the elimination of the world. What he's really talking about is discontentedness here. He's pointing to the Four Noble Truths. That's the wisdom one needs in order to make an end to discontentedness. Any questions on that?
It's clear.
Okay. So now let's go to the next one. There is that base. That's the title of this. There is, monks, that base where there is neither earth nor water nor fire nor wind, neither the base of infinity of space, nor the base of infinity of consciousness, nor the base of nothingness, nor the base of neither perception nor non-perception, neither this world nor another world, neither sun nor moon. Here, monks, I say, there is no coming, no going, no standing still, no passing away, no being reborn. It is not established, not moving, without support. Just this is the end of discontentedness. Okay, so whenever you see the Buddha talking about these four elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, he's always referring to the physical body. That's how the physical body was described during his lifetime, and even today in traditional medicine in places like Thailand and India and other places, they will describe the physical body through these four elements. So the earth element represents the solids of the body. This is like your teeth, your bones, your nails, your hair, all these different solids that are part of the body. The water represents the fluids of the body. So this is like the blood, the urine, the saliva, the tears, the pus. This is all water of the body. The fire is the temperature, the heat of the body. As you know, the body has a certain temperature to it. It's often also associated with digestion itself, because digestion is kind of a function of this fire element that is digesting the food that we eat. And then the wind represents the movement in the body. This is how your feces moves through your large intestine, and it moves through the intestines and out the body. This is how the blood moves in the body, through wind. So the body is described through these four categories or these four elements, and illness in the body through traditional medicine is also described through these four elements. So instead of saying you have a cavity in your tooth, what a traditional medicine practitioner would think is you're having a depletion of the earth element. The earth element is starting to deplete in the body, right? Or if you have osteoporosis, which is a weakening of the bones, they would say you have a depletion of the earth element in the body. Or if you have excessive urination, they would say you have an increase of the water element in the body, right? So whenever you see these four elements, the Buddha is referring to the actual physical body. So he says, that base where there is neither earth, water, fire, or wind. What he's saying here is when there is essentially no physical body. That's what he's saying there. That base where there is neither earth, water, fire, or wind. So when there's no establishment of the physical body is what he's saying. Neither the base of infinity of space, these four things, these are those things that are part of the jhanas, but not everybody experiences them. I haven't really talked about these much because the Buddha doesn't really talk about them much. Some people experience them, some people don't. In terms of the jhanas, in order to get to enlightenment, everybody would need to experience those jhanas. But these particular attainments are not something that everybody experiences as part of this progression towards enlightenment. So here he's saying, neither, and then he goes into saying neither this world nor another world, saying that there's no existence in this world or another world. That means any of the realms, any of the five realms. And then neither sun nor moon. Not exactly sure what that is, other than just to say, essentially when there is no base for existence, okay, when essentially you've let go of the five aggregates, when the mind is no longer holding on to form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, then there is no existence, is what that whole first paragraph is talking about. Here, monks, I say there is no coming, no going, no standing still, no passing away, and no being reborn. So once the mind has let go of this physical body and these five aggregates, then there's no coming and going. if you think about different times in your life when you've always been on the go, right? You've always wanted to travel here and go there and do this and do that. The mind just is never perfectly content and peaceful where it's at. It's always got to be going somewhere else. This is the coming and going. Okay? So the Buddha is saying, you know, once you let go of all this stuff and the mind is essentially peaceful, the mind is enlightened, there is no coming and going. There's no back and forth. There's no more constant craving trying to want you to go here and go there. There's no standing still. There's no passing away. And there's no being reborn. So this is what I was saying a few classes ago, where I was saying, once you train the mind deeply and you essentially eradicate all this pollution of the mind, then once the body dies, there's no passing away. There is no death, because you don't see it as death. You just see it as the impermanence of the body and the impermanence of the mind, and they're just separating. This is what the Buddha called the deathless, that once you fully attain enlightenment, you no longer perceive the death of this physical body as being the death of a person, but instead it's just the sequence of events, the impermanent events that are happening, and it's just time for the body to break up, time for the mind to separate. So there's no passing away, right? It's you've already essentially eradicated all the pollution of the mind. The mind is now enlightened, and no being reborn. So once the mind's enlightened, there's no more rebirth. It is not established, not moving, without support. So this physical body that he's talking about in the first paragraph, when the mind is enlightened, it can't be reestablished anywhere else. There's no support for it. The craving, desire, attachment is what creates rebirth. It's the fuel that creates rebirth. So having eliminated that pollution of the mind, then this physical body can't be established. There's no support for it to be reborn. And then he says, okay, just this is the end of discontentedness. So he's honing in on letting go of this physical body and no longer holding on to it, because that's one part of the craving that the mind has to let go of. And once one does that, then there's no more rebirth. There's no way that you will experience another existence in the cycle of rebirth, because you've eliminated all the discontentedness. You've done the work. You've gained the wisdom to eradicate that ignorance. You've eliminated craving, desire, attachment. You've eliminated anger, hatred, ill will, all three poisons, all the 10 fetters. Everything's eliminated, destroyed, and now there's no death. The mind is just completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The end of discontentedness.
Yeah, okay, so last question for now. It's from chapter 141.
Okay.
Yeah, at the end of the chapter, the Buddha is saying what is impermanent is discontentedness. I'm sorry, it's in the second paragraph.
Okay.
Yes, what is impermanent is discontentedness. Do you think that he means clinging to what is impermanent is discontentedness, or will lead to discontentedness?
Yes.
So the fact that everything is impermanent doesn't lead to discontentedness, but clinging to impermanence is what leads to discontentedness.
Clinging to anything is going to cause discontentedness. Yeah. So what is impermanent is discontentedness. So the way you're wording it is, whatever the mind is clinging to, it is impermanent, and it's going to lead to discontentedness. And then that next sentence, those discontent feelings in the mind, that's not the self. That's not who you are. That anger, that frustration, that sadness, that happiness, that excitement, the boredom, the loneliness, that's not you. That is not the self.
Yeah, now it's clear. Okay, since that these are all the questions we have for today.
Okay, so I guess we're all done. So let's take a look at what is going on for next class. Get the little schedule up here. So our next class, we're in volume 12, which is Lowly Art, chapters 1 through 39. And then the following week, we're going to be in chapters 40 through 59. That's the end of the book. This book that we just finished was like a 6-week book. We were in that one for quite a while. But now we're into the smaller books, which is going to basically complete this program for this iteration of it, which is going to be volume 12 and volume 13. So the next 2 weeks is going to be the book of Lowly Art. And then the 2 weeks after that, the last 2 weeks of July, are going to be the volume 13, which is Generosity. So if you have the Buddha Vajana books, you can read those if you like. But I really suggest that you guys download the translations that I've done from the website, buddhadailywisdom.com. From there, you'll be able to see the updated translations and the ones that I'm using in the class, which I think will read a lot easier for you as we go through these chapters. So thank you all for learning. Thank you all for dedicating your time and effort to studying the words of the Buddha. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 18, which is God's creative actions. You have free will. This is where I'm going to be teaching about how to get to enlightenment, either with a relationship with God or without a relationship with God, depending on how you would like to choose to practice. I'll guide you in both of those situations, because based on what you've been taught in the past about God, your mind might have been conditioned in a way that's actually inhibiting enlightenment. So depending on how you would like to practice, you're going to get both of those directions and how to actually pursue enlightenment, either with a relationship with God or without one. So I'll be covering that in tomorrow's class on Sunday at 9 o'clock Thai time. And then this Wednesday, we'll be doing breathing mindfulness meditation in our Wednesday class. So until I see you next time, have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.